Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this .NET Maps SDK session on building apps. I would like to also welcome our online viewers. My name is Preeti Maske. I'm the lead principal product engineer on .NET Maps SDK, joined by my colleague Morten Nielsen, who is the senior principal dev lead for .NET Maps SDK. And we have Mike Branscombe, who will be helping us with moderation of online questions. We would love to hear from you, so please take a moment at the end and share your feedback by completing the survey available in your events app. We would like to improve as we present every year and would like to hear from you. All right, so we have 3 sessions this year. Session 1, which is this one, is about building apps with .NET Maps SDK. Then on Thursday, we have a demo theater presentation on building native apps with ArcGIS Maps SDK using Calcite toolkit for .NET. Calcite is a new toolkit. We just released it. It's for styling your apps. So I recommend going to that session if you want to learn about styling your apps with Calcite styling and tooling. Then session 2 is our advanced workflow session. In that session, we talk about real-world scenarios from editing to authentication and much more. So that would showcase you some of the advanced capabilities of the SDK using feature forms, authentication, MVVM patterns. So if you're looking for learning more on advanced workflows, please visit that session on Friday morning. Okay, so what are we talking about today then? We'll start with a brief introduction and an overview of the SDK. We'll outline steps on how to get started with the SDK and set up the development environment or any necessary configurations. We'll introduce various UI frameworks that are available that can be used to develop applications on the platform or the architecture of your choice. This will help you decide which UI framework you can use for your development workflows. Then we'll briefly go over the latest features and improvements in .NET Maps SDK. Since last Step Summit we saw you. So we'll just browse through all the new features we have. And after I'm done with presenting those, then we'll give a brief demo or demonstration on how to get started with the SDK, what other SDK components you can use, and what tools you have available to accelerate your development. And then I can browse you through all the SDK resources that are available today to help you take help from resources, API ref, samples, demos, and etc. All right, for all the first-timer developers in the room, can I get a raise of hands if there are any first-time developers? All right, just one hand. Well, it's still to review what our Maps SDK has to offer. So .NET Maps SDK or native Maps SDK in general provide powerful APIs to enable your apps with mapping and GIS capabilities. Using APIs, you can build applications that are connected to ArcGIS systems such as ArcGIS Online or Enterprise. And one of the key aspects of using native SDKs is that you can build applications that are connected, that are enabled with offline workflows, which means you can use local maps and data to be connected. You can build applications using local maps and data that are occasionally connected or completely disconnected. And the beauty of .NET Maps SDK is that it's a cross-platform SDK, meaning you can develop for Android, iOS, Catalyst, and Windows, targeting both desktop and mobile devices. And the common API enables you to easily write code that is shared across all those platforms. So how do you get started with building an app with .NET Maps SDK? So as I mentioned, it's a cross-platform tool. You can develop on Windows or you can develop on Mac. So if you're developing on Windows, you can use Visual Studio and use any of the Microsoft MAUI template or any framework, any UI framework template that you are targeting, and use reference and NuGet packages directly from Visual Studio. Or you can install our extension from within Visual Studio. We also have our boilerplate template code available in Visual Studio Market. So if you are a market shopper, you can download the templates from Visual Studio Marketplace. And if you are familiar with developers.arcgis.com, you have access to downloading the V6 or the setup from our developers.arcgis.com as well. If you are developing on Mac, you would use Visual Studio for Code with .NET MAUI extension. You would need to install .NET 8 SDK on top of these two components. And to install the templates on Mac, you can directly use command line interface to install templates. You would say .NET New, install ESRI ArcGIS Runtime Project Templates, and create a new app. And the last two commands here on the screen are showing you how to build and run for iOS or Mac Catalyst. As I was talking about frameworks, Morten, would you walk through all the frameworks we have available?
Yes. So this is .NET SDK, and so we run on most places where .NET actually runs. But that's just the business logic of your app. When it comes to actually showing something on a screen, you have to pick some kind of UI framework, and we support quite a lot. There's a good old WPF that's been around for, I think we're hitting 20 years or something like that, which we fully support. But there's also a much newer framework, the Universal Windows Platform, or UWP. It runs on a different kind of .NET called .NET Native. It runs Sandbox, so it's an app that can't do stuff that the user don't really want it to do. So it's sort of a more secure environment, especially if your app publisher, you might not trust them as much. The app can't go and write through your registry and stuff like that. But that sandbox can also kind of be a limitation for some people. And it hasn't really caught as much on as I think Microsoft would have liked. And so what they've done is they've taken this brand new UI framework of UWP and they kind of pulled it out of that sandbox in .NET Native and allowed you to build both actually C++ apps, but also .NET 8 apps with it, and you get the latest .NET features. So you just get this really powerful, modern UI experience in .NET 8 with this more modern version of SAML. And lastly, and we added the support about a year and a half ago, was .NET MAUI, so that's sort of the evolution of Xamarin Forms. And that allows you to build apps on Android and iOS and Catalyst as well as Windows. And this sort of sits as an abstraction layer on top of the native UI frameworks. So on iOS, it's sitting on top there are Objective-C classes, and Android on top of their Android views. And on Windows, it actually sits on top of WinUI. So our WinUI components actually sit under that in our MAUI offering. So kind of a different way to look at that is we have this whole gray box you see on the slide, and that represents the core of the Maps SDK, all the native Maps SDK that you also see is the Swift and Kotlin and Qt and stuff. They all have that common code where actually most of the Maps SDK lives. It's all written in C++, high performance, runs on all the platforms. And we kind of compile that into different runtimes, one for Windows, one for Android, iOS, and Windows, and so on. What the .NET Maps SDK does is it kind of takes that native engine and creates this .NET SDK that exposes all these native components to the users. And so at that level, it's all the non-UI code. And the name you see here is what the NuGet package is named. So it's sort of what you would reference, and you just get that base common API for all the platforms. When it comes to do UI frameworks, that's where we kind of build another level on top. So we have a set of NuGet packages, one for each UI framework that you want to use. There's one for WPF, one for WinUI, one for UWP, one for native Android apps, and one for native iOS apps. We don't talk so much about iOS and Android native SDKs because most people have sort of moved on to using these abstractions that sits on top. So on top of those native Android, iOS, and Windows, we build this MAUI package on top that sort of just abstracts these native views. So you get the same API on top. So that's sort of how we build the whole SDK. So generally you would be working with the WPF, the UWP, or this big purple MAUI box, typically what you build based on what you're targeting. So that's kind of how that sits.
So yeah, if you're planning on going mobile in future, I think .NET MAUI is your choice, right? Because that will entail for all the platforms.
Correct.
Cool. So what have we done since we last met in Dev Summit? We had our first release 204 soon after Dev Summit. So I'm gonna go over some of the features that we've been released since 204 until 206 recently. So if you have worked with S63 data, In 204, alongside of Windows, .NET Maps SDK now supports S63 encryption ENC data across all platforms, including Android, iOS, Catalyst, UWP, and Windows on ARM64. However, this NuGet package is not publicly accessible. You will need to contact us to gain access to this ENC package for S63 encrypted data. We also added a new analyzer we introduced in 204 for NuGet packages when users forget to add or register their runtime libraries. So this analyzer warning will generate a build error if use ArcGIS runtime is not included in your application. Likewise, when using the .NET Maps SDK toolkit, a build error will be generated if use ArcGIS toolkit is absent. Maybe we should show this in the demo, Morten,
Okay.
to show how this analyzer warning pops up. Then we also added support for hosting .NET MAUI visuals in the callout. This was kind of missing in our MAUI space, so we worked on it and added support for visuals in the callout within MAUI UI framework. And I would like to see this in the demo as well. I think it will be useful. If you have worked with arcade expressions in the past, .NET Maps SDK already support arcade expressions. But if you have worked with arcade, you know that they work within a certain profile and in a certain context. So this context can now be established by setting the profile property on arcade evaluator. And this enables the script writer to define the set of profiles and functionality limitations that are suitable for their particular use case within that profile. Backgrounding. Well, tracking location and enabling background for apps has become a very common workflow in modern applications. And .NET Maps SDK supports this functionality already. But what we have done is we have improved system location data source on iOS to ensure that the backgrounding location updates continues even if your map is if your device is turned off or the app is running in the background. This just simplifies the process of enabling background and prevents the developers with the requirement to manually configure their CLL location manager, which is the iOS APIs for backgrounding. So we hope that this API helps users with some ease where they don't have to enable CLL location manager. So use this API if you want to use backgrounding on iOS. But do remember there are other settings that are required besides this, but this just helps with the development. And we will soon publish a backgrounding workflows tutorial completely because we've been getting a lot of requests on how to do backgrounding for these apps. So we have plans on publishing a blog post or a tutorial on the entire workflow for all mobile platforms. But the interim, we created a demo, as you can see in the URL here, backgrounding location tracking. This is available today in our demos repo that showcases all the backgrounding workflows for all platforms. Then in 205, we added a new interface called iHTTP Message Interceptor. This interface is useful for intercepting and processing HTTP requests and responses made by the Maps SDK. If you have worked with ArcGIS HTTP client handler in the past, this is a replacement that is now marked as deprecated. So we recommend switching to using iHTTP Message Interceptor. Morten, do you want to?
Yeah, so this can be really useful for you if you want to, for instance, log your request, or you want to modify the request. Like you want to add some extra headers that your server requires, or you want to use mocking. We actually use this heavily for mocking of our requests. So you can both intercept the outgoing request, but also the response that comes back, you're actually able to modify or completely not even like just stop the request, make your own little thing. That's what we do for mocking, for instance, for testing. So there's quite a lot of scenarios that opens up to completely take over the whole network stack and everything we do. You can monitor, you can change it, you can break it, of course, but you can also like add your own stuff to it. It's a very, very useful little interface for you to work with.
Thank you. Then last year, we already had feature forms as one of our toolkit control that is being used for attribute editing, but we enhanced that toolkit control to now support attachments and barcode scanner input. You will see feature forms in action in the advanced workflow session on Friday. So that's a interesting session to see the real world full-on editing workflow that uses the full capabilities of feature form view and how you can use it for attribute editing and authentication and updating the data on the fly. So highly recommend that session. Then we've been working on introducing some new authentication types. These types were added to streamline authentication workflows. These types eliminate the need to pre-register server info or OAuth client info, which are also now deprecated, by the way. And these just ease the process and aligns with the other native Maps SDK. Our other native SDK families have been using these common APIs, so we have been transitioning over to these APIs to sync up with those and make it easy for the entire workflow of authentication. And I think we also added to JSON and from JSON methods on all credentials to provide modern alternative to iSerializables. So you can now use to JSON and from JSON for your authentication. And because these authentication types are new and people and developers are transitioning from older APIs to these new APIs, so we decided that we should post a summary of what these new APIs mean and how people can transition. So we have a new blog post on the URL that you're seeing here. It outlists all the authentication workflows that you can do with these new APIs and how to transition, what's the difference, how they are better than the previous versions. So I recommend going through that blog post as well. 206. In 206, we added support for .NET 9 all the way through SDK, templates, samples, demos. So .NET 9 is now supported across the stack. In continuation to our authentication types, we added 2 more authentication types, OAuth user credential and access token credential. These are also new types that provide APIs to secure and refresh tokens for accessing predictive services or for managing credentials that access token secured services from ArcGIS content and services. Another new API on a popular request that we introduced in 206 is remote certificate validation callback. This API is used for checking server certificates and handling server certificates. Authentication Manager now has this API that allows you that takes a callback for handling server certificates. There are many use cases, but the most common cases where users would want to use this if they want to accept server certificates that would otherwise be rejected by the system. For example, app needs to make an HTTPS connection to a development server or a proxy that uses self-signed certificate. Or user wants to reject the certificate that would otherwise be accepted by the system. For example, they want to pin their app to only a specific set of certificates that they want under their control rather than any other certificate. Very powerful API, and it's been requested for many releases. And how would you do that? You would subscribe to remote server certificate validation callback for Authentication Manager current instance, or you can also set this up on a startup in a configuration API using our configuration API to use the remote server certificate callback. So those were the updates for the core SDK part of it. We have also been working on miscellaneous stuff. MVVM, as you all know, is a very common pattern. So we posted or created a blog post on MVVM patterns and how to incorporate MVVM in your GIS applications built using .NET Maps SDK. If you work with SDK, I'm sure you probably know there is a WPF sample viewer available in Marketplace. I'm excited to announce that we also now have Android sample viewer displaying the same functionality in Google Play Store. As I was talking about backgrounding workflows, please check out this backgrounding location tracking demo for all mobile platforms. And we have authentication workflows I was talking about that explains you different workflows, how to use these new APIs, what is the replacement of the deprecated APIs, and what are the benefits of using these new APIs. And this new calcite.NET toolkit. Excited to announce we now have calcite.NET toolkit. This was also a very much requested by users for many years. They need to style their apps. So we now have this toolkit that you can use to style your apps in a common way. And as I mentioned, there is a demo theater tomorrow, on Thursday. So please go to that session to see how you can style your apps and use this toolkit. So far, we've been talking about .NET Maps SDK. But besides our .NET Maps SDK, we work on different other enhancements and features that are added across all native Maps SDK. And there's a big list that I don't have time because we want to cover other stuff. But this is some of the most common areas that has been seen new features, enhancements, updates, or additional APIs and stuff like that. So if you work with Geometry Editor now supports snapping, reticle vertex tool, or haptic feedback. Feature Form has seen a lot of enhancements in the past year. You can do attribute editing. You can do attribute editing if there is no feature definition. They now support attribute rules and much more. Clustering got enhancements on support for graphic overlays and arcade expressions. We now support OGC 3D tile layers. There's render support on ArcGIS scene layers. So ArcGIS scene layers render has always been read-only, but in 205 we added support for setting a render on an ArcGIS scene layer. There are updates in the GeoTrigger space. There are support for dynamic feature fences. And utility network is a big area where lots of features and updates are happening in the past year. You can trace, you can edit offline utility networks, edit associations, and much more. And as I mentioned, this is not the complete list. I highly recommend reading through our release notes to learn more about new features and updates that have happened across SDKs between 204 and 206 to learn more about what's new. With that, I think we should show some cool stuff, Morten.
Should we?
Yes.
Okay. Switch me over?
Yeah.
Let's get started on writing some code. It is a developer conference after all.
Yeah.
I'm here in Visual Studio. Just opened it up. I'm on the file new project, so I haven't done anything at all. And we're just going to start from scratch. But if you have our Visual Studio extension installed, which you can get from the marketplace or from our download section, you will find a little category here that says ArcGIS. And if you select that one, you will get all our project templates listed. And all these do is pretty much a blank app with just a map, the NuGet references, and things just kind of configure for you to get started real quick. It's not a whole lot, but it just kind of gets you started quick. But I figured instead of doing that, I'm going to go completely blank. And instead, I can do a WPF, I can do WinUI, I can do UWP, I can do Maui, but I figured since Maui is the new kid on the block, why don't we do Maui? So in this case, I'm just going to go with the .NET Maui completely blank app here. I'm just going to go through the dialog. I'm going to give it an awesome name, my awesome map app, because it's going to be awesome. I can pick .NET 8, pick .NET 9. I'm just going to go for 8 for now. And what Visual Studio do, it's magic. Boom, boom, boom. 3, 2, 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. And no, okay, I thought it crashed for a second there. Phew. So here's my app. And if you're doing WPF or WinUI or something else and not doing Maui, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. Everything I show you is identical, except if I point out something specific to Maui that's specific to Maui. So if you see something different, it's really not that different. There's only like slight modifications. So if you never built a mobile app before and you're, I don't know, an experienced WPF developer, you're really close to being able to be a mobile developer. It doesn't take much more. You might notice the project over here, it has just a little bit more than you might be used to if you use WPF. So main page here, you might have seen it called main window, for instance. You now have this new platforms folder. But there's also the app SAML, and Maui is kind of specific. It has this Maui program thing that kind of launches and configures your app before it runs. So that's one difference you'll see. You'll also see in the platforms, there's one for each folder, one for each platform. And this is where specific app manifests or like things that needs to be for that platform is in, like does the app have access to location? If it's something you have to define in iOS and Android, otherwise you won't be able to do that. And this is a multi-targeted project, so you actually see multiple targets here. So it shows that I'm targeting all 4 of the ones we support. You can remove the ones you don't care about. And so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to add our SDK. So I'm just going to right-click the dependencies and manage my NuGet references. And so I'm going to go browse, start typing. Oh, it's already remembered it all. So here is that common, remember that common green box I showed? That's the one that has all the base logic that's non-UI. It has everything you need for doing geometry calculations, working with feature layers and so on. But if I want to do rendering, I need to pick a UI framework package. There's, for instance, the WPF one I mentioned if you're doing WPF. Since we're not doing WPF, we are doing Maui. We're going to find the Maui one down here somewhere. Where is it? Did I just pass it? There we go. And you'll see down here that it'll actually take a dependency on that common package too. So you don't have to reference both. It'll automatically kind of pull all the stuff it needs. And then for Android, it takes Android into, which then in turn takes the runtime in. So there's a whole chain of packages that will resolve to. So I'm just going to install that. So it's going to go to NuGet download. You can actually see all the packages it ends up downloading because there's all the dependencies with the native libraries and the individual packages. Just going to accept. And that should pretty much be it. We'll close these here real quick. All right. So I now have the thing referenced, so let's go and add an actual map control. And in Maui's case, they add all this junk, scroll view, labels, buttons. I'm just going to get rid of that because I don't want any of that, and I'm going to add a grid. And in my grid, I want to add our map control. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to have to register the namespace, and it's so kind of me to autocomplete with the first option. So that gives me access to all the Esri controls. And there are 2. There's the map view and the scene view. So map view for 2D, scene views for 3D. I'm just going to go with the defaults. Thank you, Copilot, for auto-completing. And that's almost it, but I do have to tell it what map I want to render. So again, I'm going to delete all this boilerplate code that's in the code behind. We don't really care about that. And I'm just going to do quick and dirty adding a map. Let's just restore that, and I'll explain what's going on. So the map view has a map property. What map do you want to render? I'm going to create a new map and define the base map style as the imagery standard. And that should hopefully be it. So I'll just hit run. And let's see what happens.
And on the contrary, if you're using templates, you don't have to make or delete the boilerplate code that is coming in Microsoft's templates, because our templates are built in with the boilerplate code that is necessary for getting you started.
Right. And it will have a little view model. I know I'm kind of being lazy here and not doing the view model. So if you go like, this guy's not using proper patterns. We'll do that on Friday for sake of argument or sake of just simplicity today. We're just going to do everything in code behind. Don't make that a habit when you start building big applications, but it's good for just kind of a quick experiment. On Friday, we'll do it all the right way. So please come to that session. Let's see. Nothing's happening here. My computer is stuck. This is a great demo. What is it doing? I don't see anything. Oh, something's happening. I got a crash. If I actually go back and look here at my error list, there should have been an error here. Did I not add my NuGet package? It's right there. That's odd. Anyway, I know what the problem is. It for some reason didn't call it out. When you're doing Maui, oh, here it is. I don't know, it's not showing up. Do you guys see what it says here? Use ArcGIS runtime. That was that analyzer previously mentioned. We now have an analyzer that kind of tells you to do this. So with Maui, you have to actually register these custom controls. You'll see that pretty much any third-party library, you have to go in and kind of register it. The reason they do that and just don't auto-discover at runtime is because they're really keen on performance and startup performance. They don't want to use reflection to figure this out. Because if you don't explicitly have code pass into this, then the trimmer will just trim it all away and there won't be anything. And that's actually why there was a crash. I'm not sure why now the error shows up. So what I have to do is I basically have to register it, and I'm just going to add my namespace here, Maui. And by doing that, I get access to an extension method here that says use ArcGIS runtime. Error goes away. So that's the analyzer does its work to remind me what to do. And hopefully now we should get a running app. Because it says it's awesome, so it must be awesome. And if I have an Android phone connected or iPhone connected, I can pick and also pick those devices and run them straight on there. No other code changes required. And here's my app, and it looks like it's a map of the North Pole. It's kind of white. Oops, something went wrong. So I have a little hint here. There's something in my output window. You can kind of see it's sticking out down here. It's kind of calling out some stuff with some authentication required, no token. And in this specific case, I'm using ArcGIS Online Base Map services. And to use those services, I do have to go and create like an API key to use here, or I have to sign in as a user to the portal, and that'll give me access to them as well. So because the specific service I'm using is actually secure, and I haven't really set anything up to deal with that, the map just fails to load. So if you ever have an issue with a map that just doesn't render or a layer is missing, you don't know why, first thing is look at the output window. The error would most likely be there in 95% of the cases and give you a hint on what's going on. You can, of course, write code on each layer and stuff and check if there's an issue with them loading. So, for instance, the network is down and you can tell the user, hey, I couldn't connect to the service. But just when you go through as a developer, that output window is really helpful just to show like first line of defense of why is something not working. Was I problem for authentication, or was there no network connection? The server might have been down. Can be really useful. So in this case, I do need to configure this. So I am going to add another thing to this runtime, and I'm going to include another namespace, which gives me access to another extension method. Now here, I can actually, there's an overload. I can say config.use API key. So there's actually a bunch of methods here. You can set license keys and also on. And there's more in namespace you can include, like for instance, include the HTTP namespace. You get a bunch for configure how HTTP works, and the cache size, and so on and so forth. Sorry. Thank you for that music, Mike. So I'm just going to quickly copy an API key in here. There you go. Copy and use it to your own delight. It'll be deleted in a few minutes. But so now, hopefully, oh, that's right. Thank you. This is not use license. I did that wrong. This is not the license key. It's use the API key. License key is for licensing the runtime itself and getting rid of that watermark. API keys for using ArcGIS Online Services. Thank you. That's a good thing to call out. Now I think my app might be an awesome map app. Maybe. So one thing to note, actually, when I'm building this app, I'm actually building it 4 times because I'm targeting 4 different target frameworks. So one thing you could do to speed this up a little bit is while you're developing, maybe turn off some of them. That'll just kind of create your dev loop a little faster. It'll also mean you get, if you have an error in your code, you actually get the error 4 times. The error list is good at like kind of figuring that out. But anyway, we got a map.
Yay.
So. And this can run on a mobile device as well. I can just deploy. I don't have to do anything else. It's fully configured now to run on mobile devices too. But I mean, this is not, I gotta admit, it's not super awesome yet. So let's kind of make it a little better. I'm gonna go back to my page. I want a different map. So instead of passing in a base map style, I'm gonna just give it a URL to an item on ArcGIS Online. And this is just a URL I copied from ArcGIS Online. So I just go to the item page, just go and copy that URL, and then pop that in there, and now that'll be the map, it'll load. So that's a really convenient way to do this. And I also want to put a little more stuff on my map app. So for that, we have a bunch of extra controls you can use through our toolkit. And so I can go into the NuGet Manager and I can browse with this package, or if I kind of know what it's called, I can just actually copy this line and just add toolkit.maui. I like to do it in here because it's a little quicker. And hopefully we should now see up here that it just added the toolkit to it. There's a little yellow line here. It's because it's still downloading and figuring it out. That just went away right there. So now we have access to the toolkit. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go in here and add some more. So now when I say Esri, you'll suddenly see there's a bunch more controls. That's coming from the toolkit. A whole bunch of pop-up viewers, legends, compat stuff, and I'm just going to cheat and paste in some code real quick. I'm going to add a scale line. And I want to show the scale line for the map view. And in this case, this is MAUI syntax, X reference. If you've done WPF, this is element binding. That's the equivalent of that. So the syntax for MAUI is slightly different than you might have been used to for some of the other SAM frameworks. I'm also going to put a base map gallery in here. And this one can change the base map of a map. So we're going to give it a map to work with. And so in this case, I'm binding to the map property of my map view. It could come from a view model where I might have my map actually. But in this case, I'm just grabbing it straight from the map view. I'm going to put that in its own grid. So let's quickly add a couple of columns just for it to kind of sit in. So let's just kind of quickly see what that looks like. Oh, I got another error. Oops. Let's see. What was the error here? Let's go back to my MAUI program. Because what did I say about third-party libraries you had to do? Not quite sure why it's not showing up in the error list. It normally does that, but here it is again. Now I have to use ArcGIS Toolkit. It just won't let me do this. So this again, this is a MAUI thing. Let's see if the autofix won't work. Not today. So I gotta do the same thing, use ArcGIS Toolkit. And it should be smart enough to complete that, and there we go. And so this registers all the controls with MAUI so it can figure out and find them at runtime without them getting optimized away. There we go. Here's my page map picker. I can change to different things. And I have some dots I can't click on. It would be kind of nice if I could click on these, right? So let's also go and add some more code to this. But it's starting to go. It's starting to work. We can see a little scale bar down here. We might want to add some margins. I don't know if you know, you can actually go into code while it's running. Let's do margin 20. And it just moved in. I don't have to restart. So small edges to a XAML, you can actually sit and tweak. Especially if you have two monitors, it's really nice to have your XAML on one side and the app on the other. Or even on the phone, that'll actually work. You can do this called hot reload, where it constantly updates your XAML as you're changing it. But I do want to add a little bit of code to work with this map. So I'm just thinking, what if I take the tapped event, and I'm going to add a little bit of code in here to do something with it. So what I'm going to write, I'm just going to make this method an async method because it's going to perform an async operation. I'm going to, if there's any callouts open, I'm just going to close it because I'm going to open a new callout in case I do it multiple times. I want the old one to close. I'm going to identify, and I'm going to identify the location I pressed for about 5 pixel radius in this case. And I'm just going to be lazy and just grab the first result if there's one. Now, if there isn't one, I'm just going to bail out. And then what I want to do is, I wonder if it's just a feature you clicked on and it has a pop-up definition on a table, I want to take that pop-up definition and use it to render. And if there's no pop-up definition, don't worry about it. We'll generate one for you. That's just kind of key value pair. And then I'm going to create a pop-up viewer that comes from the toolkit that allows you to render any pop-up that's defined in your map. So the pop-up, if you haven't used those, you can, instead of just showing the normal key value pair of your attributes, you can kind of create a really nice visual experience with images and charts and so on. You'll see that in a minute. So I'm just going to kind of create this one in code this time and then use the show callout at. And show callout, you can give it like a title and description. But what we added in MAUI recently, which the other APIs I've had for a while, is it can also now show UI elements in your callout. So hopefully this app should get a little more interesting. With now identify be a little more interactive. Let's see, 3, 2, 1, there we go. So there's my base map, and now when I click, I now get these like really cool formatted pop-ups with multiple images. There's charts in here. There's a bunch of key value pairs. What this looks like, you can completely define the web map, but you can also create them programmatically. If you don't want to go to the portal app, you can still create pop-ups through our API as well, and kind of define what should go in it. And we, in the toolkit, provide the ability to just create a nice rendering of this. And so we can get the different controls here. So I think at this point the app's starting to get a little more awesome. But I mentioned here, like, if there's Android local device, right now I have the subsystem for Android installed, so I can actually run on that. But if I plug an Android device in, then it would also show up in here in this list. The same thing with local devices for iOS. Or typically with iOS, you would often actually have a Mac that you remote connect to, and then you plug your device into that. You will need a Mac for iOS if you are going to do release builds, but you can do debug builds and directly deploy to your iPhone. So you can kind of do both. You can also connect to simulators that runs on the Mac, but project them back to your Windows. You don't actually have to ever use your Mac, which to me is beautiful because I don't really like using my Mac. And you can actually use touchscreen. If you have a touchscreen, you can use the simulator touchscreen, which the Mac users is like, wait, what? Did you just touch the screen on your PC and it touched the simulator? Because they can't do that on the Mac, but it actually works on the PC, which is pretty beautiful. So it's really, really neat developer experience you get with Maui here, and be able to run on all these different platforms. Yeah.
That's great, Morten.
Thank you.
We'll just quickly go over some of the resources. And Morten, if there is time, I would like to also showcase that WinUI demo. So let me go over some resources real quick before we go to that WinUI demo. So as I was mentioning, there are lots of help available to get you started, to pick and choose what functional area you want to explore, copy paste code, get hands-on experience by working through our tutorials. So your first stop shop is developers.arcgis.com/net. This is the place where you can have API-RF, tutorials, guide doc, examples. Then we also have samples for both .NET MAUI and Android. And samples are available for all platforms, but the sample viewer apps are available for WPF and Android. We have Toolkit available for you to use out-of-the-box toolkit controls that we have worked on. It's an open source, so feel free to download and work on them or enhance them or modify them to your needs. Then this place, Esri community, our favorite place where all our community users come and help each other out. So if you have questions, feel free to come and join the community and help each other. The demos app is different from samples app. These are full workflows that are packaged together as apps, and they are available for specific functional areas, for example, authentication or backgrounding or WinUI, MVVM applications. So they are like full workflow-based applications that are available for you to use. As I mentioned about the sample apps, there's one in Microsoft Store for WPF, and there's now one in Google Play Store for .NET MAUI Android. Before we go to questions, I would like Morten to showcase the beautiful app that he's worked on.
Thank you, Preeti. So we have the demo repo where we have a bunch of more full workflows, and we've been kind of working on an app. We want to try and take everything the Maps SDK can and throw at it. And we're not done, but we've done quite a lot, and we put it in. And it also is part of us kind of testing this whole new CalSite offering we have for samples. So this is kind of a preview of the app that's running right here. This is all open source. So if you go to our demos repo, you will scroll down to, where is it, WinUI Map Viewer, and you can kind of see how this whole app is built and work with it or take ideas from it. It's built with WinUI, but a lot of this stuff can still be applied or ported over to WPF or Maui as well. But just a quick little tour. It's kind of inspired quite heavily, I must admit, by the JavaScript web viewer, so you'll probably see a lot of similarities in here. Where, of course, we have layers, we have tables as in the map, and so we'll be able to open anything. You have the base map picker that I just used. It's the exact same one. There's a scale line down there that we just used as well. We're using legend control, there's bookmarks. We can, for instance, go and view the table here. So we created a custom control that works really well with the features. You can scroll as fast as you want, and it'll just iteratively keep loading and loading features from the service. So there's a really high-performance table there because we have the pop-up viewer with a little extra iterator here to go through the different features. There's the feature forms that you'll be able to edit here. I can go in and change these with validation. You'll actually see the pop-up updates as you go and apply that back. Just a little inspiration of what you can kind of build with the viewer, with the SDK as well. There's lots of layer controls. There's a whole pop-up, or sorry, not a whole pop-up, a whole portal browser. So here's like some of my content that comes from my profile and some of the favorites I have, and I can also go and search for a new map and open that. So just as an inspiration of how you might build an app that kind of does a full-on workflow.
And this is a full-on MVVM application, right?
It uses proper MVVM and tries to do much of separation and lots of custom controls and stuff like that. So something you might take inspiration to.
And uses calcite styling.
It's all calcite, yes.
Yeah, so great demo to learn more about how to use calcite in your to style your apps or use MVVM patterns. And with that, I think that's a wrap up, and we are ready for questions.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Any questions online?
We had one question online, actually, yeah. So there was the question is, are there any plans to offer recorded training sessions similar to the foundation training courses offered by Autodesk for their products? I've answered the question online, but to answer it here, within the guide documentation on the Esri developer site, we provide a whole range of tutorials for different areas of the SDK. Obviously, these are all freely available, effectively self-paced tutorials. But we've also started a new effort, and we're publishing a series of videos on YouTube. We've started with our Swift SDK, so our colleague Vivian has recorded a whole series of pre-recorded effectively tutorials that are available on YouTube. Although they're available for the Swift SDK currently, the great thing about the native SDKs is they're all built on the same foundation ultimately, and so many of the concepts that Vivian is talking about would apply equally to the .NET SDK as much as they do the Swift SDK as well. So you can find links to all of those within the Esri developer documentation.
A question there?
Is the calcite library available on Nuga.org, or is it just the Nuga?
So the question is the calcite libraries available on Nuga.org or just the source code? It is on Nuga as of yesterday. And yeah, there was a short link to the blog post. I think it was esriol.com/calcite.net. So go there, and there's a blog post that has links to all the resources there, so all the source code. Yes, and the NuGet packages are available. Just make sure you check the little preview box, and it'll show up because it's still considered preview for us. And please come to that session. We'll go through on how you can use it. We've been really happy using it, and really helped us create demos really quick that just looks good from the get-go. Yes?
Is there any plans to make Esri ArcGIS runtime NuGet package smaller than it's right now, because it includes everything, and it's not, there's often cases that we don't need all languages, we use only English and stuff like that. Maybe some kind of core package.
So the question is there any plans on reducing the size of the NuGet packages? Because yes, they're about the native SDKs, the package for architecture is about 100 megabytes, and that adds up for all the architectures and the languages. Currently, no, we looked at it sometimes and haven't really come up with a really good way to do it where that's really going to save you a lot of space. You mentioned the languages too, that you don't need the languages. That you can turn off in your build configuration. Because you can say I only support these languages, and it won't support deploy all the other languages. But it's unfortunately only a very small portion of the entire SDK that you'll save with that. But you can at least reduce that. There's a few other tricks you can do to, for instance, get rid of all the routing strings as well if you don't do turn-by-turn routing. That'll also help you reduce it a little bit more. But the actual native libraries, currently we don't have a story for kind of reducing that part of the size. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
A suggestion of the question. Maybe we can talk in one of the other sessions more about deploying. Because you can build it, but deploying on different platforms, like, okay, Windows click one, but iOS requires App Store, maybe not. But there are many like IP, nations, different organizations. Just to clarify that a little.
So this is a suggestion of share some more information about how we're going to deploy our applications to the iOS store and so on. We do have a section on deployment. It talks very specifically about the .NET Maps SDK itself, like the licensing and so on and so forth. For how to deploy to the app stores and so on, we kind of rely on Apple or Microsoft and stuff to kind of cover that subject because it kind of applies to all of them broadly, and they do have pretty good coverage on how to do those things. But I hear you, and I'll take it into consideration. Okay, so you ask, so more like, can we? Do it has to go through the App Store, and there's ways to not do that. And yes, I believe there are ways for that as well. We do it internally for some sort of testing as well. Again, the general documentation of how to deploy does cover some of those things. Kind of definitely rely a little more on Microsoft and Apple and Google to kind of provide that documentation because all that stuff is the same. So when you build a Maui app, like it's not a .NET app, it's an Android app and it's an iOS app. It actually compiles into those native libraries to some extent. So all those concepts apply equally whether you're building a Swift app or a .NET app that you deploy to iOS. It's all the same. Yeah. Yes.
More of a feature-specific question, but are there any plans currently in the road ahead to expand on geoprocessing capabilities in the scene view, or potential to actually have editable geometry or SLPKs as opposed to just read-only objects and graphic overlays?
So, the question is, are there any plans to improve geoprocessing support in scene view and being editing of 3D? I think that's a Mike question.
There are plans, yeah. There are plans to work on a series of tools that are equivalent to geoprocessing tools. Within the SDKs, we'll talk more about that in the Road Ahead session on Thursday. But essentially, those will be tools that are built directly into the core of the native SDKs instead of relying on a additional component today, like the local server component, which means they'll work on in all of the SDKs, on all of the architectures, so mobile and desktop. They'll be super fast, interactive, persistable results, and they'll take advantage of a GPU if it's available, or they'll have CPU fallback. But you'll hear more about those in the Road Ahead session on Thursday, probably along with a demo as well.
Does that include expansion on support for OGC 3D files, like beyond just mesh on support?
We're looking at that. So the second part of the question there is, do the advancements in the 3D scene view include support for additional content within the 3D tile spec? We're looking at that, of course, as we advance our support for 3D tile layers. The second part of your question, or the original question, was about editing content within scene layer packages. We're currently not necessarily looking at editing content within scene layer packages, but we are looking at supporting the same content that you can see in the JavaScript viewer today, or the scene viewer online that's built on top of the JavaScript SDK, where you can edit these 3D object feature services. So you can upload models to the feature service, and then that will be incorporated into the feature service. So we're looking at support for that on our roadmap. But again, the Road Ahead session on Thursday is a great place to ask questions about the roadmap.
Anything else?
You were using Google subsystem for Android. Is that still available somewhere for Android?
So the question is, can we use Android subsystem? So Windows subsystem for Android, which is basically allows you to run Android apps on Windows. It's just about to go away. Yes, Microsoft removed it. It's dying. I'm sad to say. It was an awesome tool, but unfortunately it's getting removed. You should be able to get it with some command lines still, I believe, but it's kind of tricky because it's not in the App Store anymore, if I'm not mistaken. It is a really great developer tool, and I'm sad to see it go too. But still, you have the ability to just deploy it to a device or use the Google emulators as well. Yeah. Okay. With that, I think we're done. Well, thank you, everyone, and please fill out your surveys.